Previously on agentpalmer.com, my love for Jurassic Park series is anything but extinct 30 years on. Brooklyn Beauties, Margo Donohue's book, is a love letter film study, and if you heard last episode, I've become a fan of Star Trek, at least the original series, but I don't think I'll be joining Cam at a convention just yet. This is the Palmer Files, episode 90, with Craig Burgess, a marketing man, a creative designer, and someone who is creating things for the right reasons now that he's seen the light, which we'll discuss, along with plenty of buzzwords that we don't like, such as thought leader, guru, content creator, and well, where have all the mavericks and renegades gone? Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 90th episode is a man in marketing called Craig. Craig Burgess, to be exact. He does marketing for Genius Division, a marketing agency, and when he's not doing that, he's creating stuff for his two Substacks, This Is Not Value and Yeah Wednesdays. I met Craig on Twitter, and that's where, as you'll hear shortly, our digital and creative marketing perspectives aligned a bit. You'll hear about that alignment, but you'll also hear us discuss the content wheel, the authentic self, consistency, thought leaders, and how the world probably doesn't need another one of those, or even another guru. Plus, we dive into intent and algorithms, curation, attention span, and much, much more. Before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can always find the contact information for Craig and myself in the show notes. You can visit either of Craig's two Substacks for his content or for more about him at either yeahwednesdays.substack.com, that's YEAH Wednesdays, or you can visit thisisnotvalue.substack.com, thisisnotvalue.substack.com. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let the conversation begin. Craig, it is very rare in this day and age that I find somebody online who I basically agree with.
You're just flattering me already, aren't you?
I think I am, because I see you and what I would describe as ranting on Twitter about the authentic self and well, I don't think I've seen you say this, doing things for the right reason, like creating content for maybe creating content's sake, not to make money. And I, as a, podcaster and as a blogger for over a decade that is not making money. Like I just want to share things with people, and I am who I am. I applaud you, and I try not to retweet everything I see of yours because I'm like, people are going to think I'm stalking him. But like, I do tend to agree with where you come from. And I want to tell you that while I don't maybe interact with everything, like I 100% agree with all of it.
Now, anybody who listens to this, they're going to go, right, I need to check this Craig out on Twitter. And they're going to look at it and go, well, that's not that interesting, is it?
Well, there are too many people who are snake oil salesmen, for lack of a better term.
I agree. I think that's the correct term to use. And
I've been a quote unquote consultant for people that were looking to either get into podcasting or blogging or content. They are always astounded when I sit down with them, I listen to their story and I go, you don't want to start a podcast. Because everybody they've talked to has said, you should start a podcast. Podcasts are in. That's what you do. Or like, you should start this, that, and the other. And I'd love to tell you it's ego and like, I don't want more competition for my show. But I think generally speaking, people that follow fail.
Yeah. I guess we should rewind just a touch to say what these controversial opinions are that I'm sharing.
I don't think they're controversial. I think you're just you're basically alone, because there are so many people out there that are like, I have the 10 things you need to do for successful content.
Yeah, I'll give you a tiny little bit of backstory to put some context to this for anybody that's listening. That are like, what the? Can I swear, by the way?
Yeah.
I could just use this. What the fuck are we actually talking about? I've got a soundboard next to me, by the way, that I may use for my own amusement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where to start with this? Right. I am in marketing. I am a man. Hello. That's another thing that might happen as well sometimes. My voice changer. I am a man in marketing called Craig. I run an agency, and I am objectively in marketing. That is my job. So I see a lot of content, quote unquote content, every single day of my life. I see podcasts, blog posts, tweets, LinkedIn posts, email newsletters. I'm responsible for creating some of them as well. So in terms of the word content, the word content is a very loaded term for me these days, even though I work in it and I do advise clients just like you. I advise clients on how best to make these and things like that. I found myself at the beginning of coronavirus in March 2020, sat there at home in lockdown thinking, fuck, I think I need another revenue stream. Because I'd been on Twitter seeing all these posts about people talking about revenue streams and things like this. But it was a genuine fear for me. I thought maybe we were going to lose business. You know, the whole world was locking down. Businesses were shutting down, all that kind of thing. It was kind of a scary time for me. And I thought I need to consider making myself well known, or at least more known than I was at the time. I had about 500 Twitter followers. So the thing for me I picked just randomly was Twitter. And I began the content wheel, so to speak,
okay,
of writing 10 tweets per day. So I was one of those people that you were talking about at the beginning of March 2020. The disingenuous people, the people who, you know, just tweet stoicism quotes constantly to try and inspire people on Twitter. And I won't say too much more about it yet, because I'm sure we'll get into it more, but I got to 5,000 followers and then quit the game, so to speak, because it became rubbish. I'll say that. Yeah,
Twitter is the social network I chose, because as a marketer, the moment Facebook stopped being what it was originally, the moment Facebook was like, you're going to have to, I know 100 people are following you, but you're going to have to pay me $5 to reach 10 of them, as opposed to just maybe 5 of them, was the moment I swore off Facebook. And that was in like 2016 or something like that. I didn't swear it off professionally, because I feel like that's not something that you and I can do. We're stuck based on clients, or, if we ended up in a corporate world, you end up having to do those things. So I can't swear it off completely, but personally I did. And I chose Twitter at that time. And I got a lot of followers from being involved in Twitter chats, which I don't even know if people still really do them to the extent that they were. There was basically one happening all the time, and there were about 4 or 5 really good marketing ones. But my favorite part about the marketing ones was, and this was before 2020, but I would say I always took a piss out of your 2020 persona, basically, because there would be those people that are like, marketing Twitter chat, and they would be like, how do you handle e-newsletter signups, and somebody would be like, you have to create a funnel. Like, because that was the buzzword at the time. You have to create a funnel. And I would be like, you have to create good content so that people share it organically. Mm. And I never played the game because I was sick of it just looking at it. Which is why I'm on the outside. It's why I only got so far. But I can sleep at night. I'm not lying to anybody, and I feel great when I hit publish.
Yeah, I guess that's where I found myself at when I was at 5,000 followers about a year and a half later. I'd spent a year and a half on Twitter, 2-3 hours a day, growing this following. And then I kind of took a step back at it because, you know, if you go to my Twitter now, you'll see the pinned tweet. It's, I want to start imperfect Twitter. And it's very, you know, quote unquote authentic. I hate the word, but I don't know what other word to use. It's just me, basically, me being me online. I looked back at that and thinking, I have not been me online for the last year and a half. And I think I tweeted something around the time that, in fact, I think I put it on LinkedIn if I remember rightly. I tried to word this, and I don't know whether I successfully did it. This is what I said, something to this effect. I said that there's two sides to professionalism. One side of it is bullshit, essentially, and the other side of it's important. Professionalism means being good at your job, which means turning up on time, which means being truthful and honest to clients, which means doing a good job. All those things, that's professionalism.
Yeah.
Professionalism, being professional online, is not writing boring sanitized content, is not making boring sanitized videos, is not making boring sanitized podcasts. You don't have to be professional, and often that is seen as being staid and boring. You don't need to be professional online to be professional.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the flip point for me. A year and a half later, I'm like, fucking hell, what have I been doing all this time? It didn't get to the point where I couldn't sleep at night, but I wasn't one of those people who was necessarily lying, but I was finding stoicism quotes and tweeting them. But really, I believed in a lot of the stuff. I spoke a lot about consistency, which I still think is important, but I kind of exclusively spoke in that style of guru, basically.
Okay.
And nobody needs another guru. That is the whole problem with a lot of this kind of content online, and I think it's got worse in the last year. I hear this word all the time because I'm in marketing, thought leadership.
Yeah.
Everybody is trying to be a thought leader. If everybody's trying to be a thought leader, well, nobody can be a thought leader, can there? Because there's no leader of thoughts if everybody's trying to do the same thing. And people are trying to be leaders of thoughts. I saw someone on Twitter the other day, some guy selling seed oil free, some kind of nonsense about seed oil free, and he was selling tortilla chips that was free of any seed oil, and he was trying to make himself into a seed oil thought leader. I thought, what the fuck is this? It's how niche do you need to go on this ridiculousness of it? The best way to go around this, I still think now, when I've seen the other side of it, is to just be yourself online. But that seems to be so terrifying for so many people.
Well, I think that there is a distinctive generation gap online for it. And most of the thought leaders are either in and around 40. They're like younger Generation X or elder millennials, right? Of which I fall into that category. And they are people that either grew up in an era before the internet and remember what it was. So if you're like me and you got onto ICQ and IRC and before AIM and then eventually AIM, and we grew up in this world where we didn't use online to recreate ourselves. We used online to just extend ourselves. Craig, you are, I don't know, in the dorm room next to me, and you can check my AIM out of away message to find out where I am instead of just going out into the hall and knocking on my door. That's just an extension of who I am and how we used it at the time. But then there's the generation that came after us that was like, oh, I can reinvent myself online. And it is kind of bled upward where they're like, oh, other people are like, oh, I don't have to be myself. But at a certain point, and this is where I think it all falls through, most of the thought leaders I know that recreated themselves online get to a point where I'm going to put them all down in a very bland generalization, but they're all shit writers. If they were great writers, they could continue the charade. They could continue up this is who I am online and this is who I am in the real world. But at a certain point, it breaks down because they're just not that imaginative. And that's how we end up with the same cat memes and the same fortune cookie wisdom that they just Google it to try and keep up appearances as the thought leader or the guru. Or my favorite, well, I was in tourism marketing for a while, and I got to choose my own title. And there were a few. I'm a geek legitimately, by every sense of the word. Nerd, geek, dork. I probably fit some. I know there's like those graphics that determine what you are. I fit into every category possible. And so like guru was passed around. Like you could be the tech guru. Jedi was passed around, and I was like, no. At the time, my boss was calling me a web geek. And I said, I'm just going to go with that because that's how I get introduced when I speak. So that's just what I'm going to be. But that's who I am. And I've seen people try what you tried that behind the scenes, I don't know how I can keep it up. It's like, well, why do you? And you turned a corner. Do you look back and you go, what the hell was I doing?
To some extent, I do, but I think it's a necessary journey that everybody goes through.
Sure.
To discover who they want to be online, which they eventually realize, oh, I'll just be myself, and that's easy. But I think it's a necessary journey. I've seen it with a lot of friends, and I've got a lot of content creator friends. That's another phrase I hate, content creator. But I've got a lot of friends who make a living from making stuff and putting it online, specifically content in all kinds of mediums. And you see the evolution over time. You see the very professional, very, very, straightforward look at them, very serious when they first begin. And then slowly the jokes start to slip in. If they're a funny person, anyway. If they're boring, they don't do this. But if they're a funny person, it starts to slip in. Then eventually, after a few years, they either quit because they're burned out from pretending to be somebody else online.
Sure.
Or they change and they become themselves. I've seen that with everybody. When you get to a serious amount of followers on any medium, whatever that might be, on Twitter, it might be 50,000 or 100,000 followers or something like that. You can only do one of two things. You can either completely detach from your online personality. This is if you want to stay sane. You can either completely detach from your online personality or be yourself, because there's no other options available to you. You, like you said, you run out of cat memes and tweets and platitudes. You've got none of the stuff left. The only thing that is in endless abundance is being you and just saying the thing that you want to say right at that point in time. And I thought about this quite a lot because, like I said, obviously I do this as a job, and I try to help clients be a bit more genuine too, and not fall into the same traps. And I used to think somebody like, are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk? You'll know what Gary Vaynerchuk is.
Yeah, I remember. What was it? I remember when Mashable was still like, it was breaking news whenever Gary said something on Mashable before they became like a pop site. So,
yeah. I always think of somebody like Gary V, as he's known online generally. And he always used to talk about the idea of having a team behind him, and he was quite transparent about that. And I think his team's like 20 or 30, probably more people now. He's got a team behind him where he basically goes out and he might record a video and his team chops it up and decides what's to put out, and they write all his tweets, his emails, everything. He doesn't do much with his online persona, so to speak. So then it begs the question, doesn't it? Who really is that person online? If there's a 30-person team behind you, carefully creating and curating and deciding and editing everything that you say online, that's almost like a dystopian Black Mirror shit future, isn't it? You're in no control over your image online. It sounds good on the outside, but when you actually really think about it, it's not really so good. I mean, it's won him a lot of business. He's got a very successful social media agency and many other businesses. But the question comes, is it really him? And I don't think it is.
I also wonder, like, I like you also hate the word content creator. However, it's what best describes me, because blogger / podcaster is a mouthful. But I've been asked before, like, what do you want to do? And while I do want to say what I'm doing, like, I'd love to just keep writing and recording, it would still have to be me, because at the end of the day, somebody could edit this show for me. However, I can't give up that control. It would no longer be my show. And I have a few people look over my writing, but at the same time, it comes back to me after somebody takes a look at it. There's only so much control I'm willing to give up. I could never be Gary V. If I want to tweet something because I watched a sporting event, a movie, or had a fun conversation, then then I'll either share it or I won't. For me, it's binary. It's not, okay, I want to talk about the end of this game. What should I say? Committee of 5 on my, like, I can't imagine what that would be like.
It's the more I think about it, the more it's starting to feel very old school now. That kind of approach, whilst it saves you a ton of time, getting somebody else to do your socials for you or your online creation, it isn't you, and I don't think you're building any real value in it by passing it off to somebody else, because, like I said, somebody else is editing it and curating it. I think that one of the joys of the web, and really there's not many of them left, one of the real joys of the web is that you kind of get to craft who you are online in a good way. I don't mean being somebody else. I don't mean faking it. But I mean, when somebody Googles you, you get to decide what they're going to find.
Yeah.
Why the hell would you want somebody else in control of that? I want to. That's why I use Twitter. I want to be able to write things, and people can go to my Twitter and go, "Yeah, that's what he believes in," because he's putting it on his Twitter account. I wouldn't want to give that over to anybody else, and then the same goes for the podcasts that I create. The things that I write these days too is all the same. And when you said, I don't know if there's a better term than content creator, I just tend to use the term artist, any of those kind of things. I think the time is nigh that we need to take that word back, and art has a very different connotation, a very different feel to it than content. I think content is too low level, too generic maybe. When you are making it for the right reasons, which I think you and I do, the only term really for it is art.
Yeah, I think the podcast would be art, because I'm trying to, I guess I'm trying to resurrect the art of conversation. And my mother's like, I can't listen to your show for an hour. I'm like, yeah, but it's just a real conversation. I know it goes all over. I know there's a question or something you said or I said that we will never get back to. But that's like sitting down and having coffee with somebody without having your phone to interrupt you, where you're just both sitting in a booth looking at your phone for 20 minutes and there was a hi and then there was a, oh, look at this. The blog, on the other hand, that I think it's a little less art, maybe more critique, but I treat that in a way that I wrote one negative book review. Now, if I don't like a movie or a book, I just don't write about it because I don't need to do that. I don't need to tell people why they won't like it. In fact, the longest running draft of a blog post, which is still basically an outline, is don't shit on that. It's somebody's favorite. Yeah. Now, outside of that, I haven't come up with any real examples because I don't know how to determine what's not good because it's good to me. And if I don't like it, I don't watch it. But the idea being that don't put that book down because that might speak to somebody else. It just doesn't speak to you. That movie isn't for you then, maybe. And I'll be honest, it's been kind of like elevating in a way where it's like, I don't like that. I don't have anything to say about that. Next, I don't feel the need to be like, oh, I got to tell everybody this sucks.
I sit in a bit of a weird place really with that because a lot of the things I do say online is critique, and a lot of the things I write online is calling out the bullshit of a lot of things that other people write online, and I do get those comments back from people sometimes. You know, why do you care? Why are you wasting your energy on this? I quite like this. You know, one of the things I always say on one of my many podcasts, I always take the piss out of Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm constantly taking the piss out of it. And I am constantly taking the piss out of it on Twitter too. And I kind of agree with you to some extent. Yes, if the thing was made with the right intent, an artistic intent, which most movies fall under, unless we're talking big modern Hollywood blockbusters like Fast and Furious or something. When somebody makes it for the right intent, yeah, I don't think it's right to critique it as such. But when somebody isn't making it for the right intent in the first place, when they're just making the thing, and this is often what you really see online these days, when the thing they're making online is purely made to point to another thing, to either get more sales or to get you to sign up to their email newsletter or whatever that may be, the intent wasn't for pure creativity, you know, to make something that's good. That wasn't the intent. Then I think it's fair game, man. And you've got to, well, at least me anyway. I have to call out that shit because we are certainly slipping on some platforms too far over that way. Everybody wants to be the classic idea of a content creator. And when you really ask them what that means, they want to build a big TikTok account. They don't consider why they want to do it or how they want to do it. They don't want to make good content. They don't want to make art a lot of the time. They just want to be well known online. And if you're doing it for the wrong intent, that's when you slip down those routes. And I have to call that out, despite people who get in touch with me and say, you know, you're fucking wrong or you're wasting your time to do this. There needs to be more people calling that kind of thing out online, I think.
Yeah, I think I would if I saw it. But I think one of the things about, at least, and I'll take YouTube because it's the most obvious algorithm. At the beginning of the pandemic, I fell into watching Minecraft videos, Hermitcraft, Empires, this kind of stuff. And Hermitcraft is like 20 plus creators. Empires is like 13. So it's 30 some creators, some that overlap, that are creating stuff. And their popularity kind of soared during the pandemic. People were home. People could consume a little bit more than they were. But some of them got burnt out. And some of them went away, and some of them come back. Some of them take breaks. They take hiatuses. They whatever, or they move away from the Minecraft content that they're quote unquote known for, and they go do something else, and then maybe they come back or whatever. And all of them, and this is why I don't have a chance to call it out as much, because my algorithm is filled with these kind of people who are honest. They'll come back and they'll be like, I just needed a break. I just needed a break. And if you curate an authentic audience with your authentic voice, you can say, even though I have 1 million subscribers on YouTube, because of Minecraft, I think I want to play Warcraft for a bit. I want to step away. And you can do that. And maybe those 1 million people don't watch your videos anymore, but they're not going to unsubscribe. What you've done by being open and honest is not enough to make them go and unsubscribe to you. And so I ended up somehow surrounding myself in this bubble of what I would call authentic artists, who are making an attempt. I think that the weird thing about falling into that particular like Minecraft place is that almost all of it's collaborative, which I end up watching with a tinge of envy. Not maybe not a tinge. How about a huge, massive pile of envy? Because they get to make videos with each other whenever they want. They're in a shared space, a shared universe. Whereas I'm having a wonderful conversation with you, but after this call, that ends. And now I'm by myself editing. And when I write, I'm writing or reviewing something else, and I don't have that shared space as much. And collaboration for me is not easy to come by. And so I do kind of watch these videos. I'm like, man, it would be great if somehow like there was like a podcast server and just I could be like, hey, you want to do a thing together?
There's an interesting term you used when you was talking about that. Two things, because you said at the beginning, I just don't see the kind of things that you see, so I don't get to call it out, which is one good point. But then you also mentioned about curating your algorithm, and I think, to be honest, the issue is, question to you, most people don't know that they have to curate these things. Most people don't know or understand that they have to be careful what they not only like online, but look at online, and because the algorithm is always competing against you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So the question really is, do you think most people even know? You're a techie guy, you know that. But do most people even know they're being manipulated to some extent by algorithms?
I will tell you, I am amazed by the people that should know that. Like, I understand that not everybody's going to understand that. But in marketing, I'm amazed at the amount of people that don't, that use the tools, right? They'll talk about AdWords or like, anybody who likes this video or this Facebook page or this Twitter feed my ad to those people. So they understand how to use the algorithm. But then when they become just consumers, when they take off their marketing hat, they completely forget that, right? I will be honest and tell you that I maybe curate my YouTube algorithm a little too much. So for example, a buddy of mine was over and we were all just hanging out and we were talking about the way music videos used to be. And we wanted to watch music videos. Now I'm logged in on my YouTube on my big TV in the living room that we're hanging out in. However, I went to my quote unquote guest YouTube account, which everybody has access to. and I played all the videos there, because the last thing I want is a bunch of a week later when the conversation's over, I don't want those music videos now in my recommended, because I've got it curated fairly well for me.
Yeah. You don't want Oops, I Did It Again by Britney Spears on there, do you?
I mean, it's fine when I'm looking for it, right? But I don't know if it's better or worse that I go out of my way to do that. But I know it exists.
That's the slippery slope that people don't understand, though, isn't it? You understand the algorithm. So really what we're talking about here is that everything you look at online, regardless of platform, is creating a profile of you online. And some platforms like Facebook, they're creating what's called a shadow profile, where if you don't even have a Facebook profile, they are creating a Facebook profile without an account, and they're doing that.
Yeah.
Just so they can build up like a credit card statement, but way more advanced. They're building up your online habits, essentially. So when you go back to that platform, they'll show you things that you will definitely like, which is creepy.
Or things that you will just engage in. I mean, one of the things that we...
The opposite.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing we learned about Facebook in the wake of a few of the last major U.S. elections, is that they would be sure, if you were someone who couldn't hold your keyboard, so to speak, when you saw the opposition flash in front of you, they would give you more of it because they want to give you that. I think it's scary. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I pulled back and I was only on Twitter for a while, but I find myself purposefully leaving my phone in the other room now, just because I don't need it.
I'm the same, and I try. I'm not a conspiracy theorist nut by any extension, but this whole thing of algorithms is a real damn problem that nobody, or at least very few people, are actually talking about. And this is where the whole idea of content falls straight into the middle of this, because what is powering these algorithms? Content.
Yeah.
The only thing that's powering them. What is Facebook? Facebook is, well, primarily an ad platform. But what powers the ad platform? Content. Who's creating the content? You and I and everybody else. But that's where the intent thing comes back again. That the vast majority, I'd say, I don't like throwing out random percentages that are not fact checked, but I'd say easily 80 or 90% of the content that you'd find on any of those platforms is content made just for the algorithm, purposefully designed to be engaged with either negatively or positively, and to get an extreme reaction out of somebody. It's not a long form conversation like me or you are having right now. It is purposefully designed, and I think that's important, purposefully designed to get a reaction out of somebody. Somebody like Mr. Beast on YouTube, his 3-hour-long interview with Rogan, where he's explaining he is essentially a YouTube algorithm geek. That's what he is. I absolutely detest his videos. I detest everything that he does online, apart from the fact that he does a bit of charity work. I detest everything that he makes because he purposefully designs everything to do well in the algorithms, regardless of whether it's good or not. And I think that part of it there is one of the biggest reasons why I rail against a lot of this stuff, when people are making things for the intent to be engaged with and consumed, rather than making it because they want to make it, rather than making it because, they just woke up one day and thought, I'd really love to start a podcast because I'm really passionate about, I don't know, Rubik's Cubes. That's the right reason to make a podcast or a blog or a Twitter account or whatever. The wrong reason to do it is to say, I want to build an online platform. I want to build an online following. And honestly, that's the side where a lot of my clients and business people will come from. They want to become a thought leader online. So they look at it in that sense. I want to be a thought leader. What does that mean? I need 10,000 followers on Twitter. So what am I going to tweet? Well, I sell plastic cups, so I'm going to tweet about plastic cups all day long and become a thought leader in plastic cups. But the truth of it is it's dull and boring, and nobody's going to pay attention to it for very long.
Well, I think that for me, the quote unquote Twitter exodus at the end of 2022, for me, that was the double down on my platform. That was the put it all into the podcast, put it all into the blog, put less energy out there. Because guess what? Whether Twitter exists for another decade or century or another 4 months or 4 weeks or 4 days, I have no control over that. I do own my hosting and pay for my domain and for my podcast. So these are things that I can control, and I can put all my energy into them to make them good, or as good as I can make them. And I don't have to worry about them going away. It's on me. It's in my control. And I think that if the algorithms that exist that we complain about or that we try to cheat in some way, I mean, for those of you who aren't in marketing, AdWords and Google Analytics, these are all things that kind of give you insights to either pay to play and be on top as a sponsored search result, or you learn from them so you can write the content in a way that brings you to the top. But the thing that is the worst kept secret in marketing that nobody talks about is that good content will generally, over the long term, trump good content. The problem is we don't get paid by clients for something that might be good tomorrow and 5 years from now. They want their analytics report at the end of the month to say that we generated 500% more traffic with this ad campaign than we did last month. And so there's a lot of, not marketing wise, but just content wise and creation wise, for the wrong reasons, there's a lot of making sure it looks good tomorrow.
Yes.
Well, what about a month from now, a year from now? Like, what about that kind of stuff? And I will say, having been in a marketing department that was full of, I should really be nicer when I say this, followers, not an original thought, but really for a lot of the team I was on, these are people that really want to go into the convention circuit and hear people talk, despite the fact that the people that are talking about something that was successful a year ago, and they've spent the last 6 months talking about it. So now it's 18 months old that you're just consuming right now. It was just, it's just frustrating because you go, I have an original idea. We can try it. Maybe it will work. Maybe it won't, but it's not going to be the same as everybody else.
I think what a lot of people tend to forget is, there's the priority and the focus on numbers all of the time. And I think it's a scourge in general. Yeah. Focusing on the numbers rather than the actual thing that you're saying. But another thing that people tend to forget is that the content that you're making online, whatever it may be, is a reflection of you. It's a way. I think it might have even been Jack Butcher has said this at one time in his early days. It's kind of replicating yourself. So whatever you believe in, a piece of content that you make is replicating yourself online, so you don't have to say it again, essentially. And if you get to that point where you are saying the things you want to say and that you are replicating them out of your head into a video or a podcast or a blog post or whatever, something that's permanent and staying online, that's got value regardless of how many people have seen it. Even if it's 2 people, even let's say 1 person, the 1 person who sees it, they look at that and they go, damn, he's exactly right. And I'm going to get in touch with him and I'm going to talk to him, or whatever that leads to. it's connected with one person, and that thing deeply connecting with one person is far more important than something getting 3,000 likes online that leads to zero. So what? It got 3,000 likes. That just means that it's run of the mill, that everybody agrees with it. Why do you want to make something that everybody agrees with? You're completely right that a lot of people in marketing are followers. And I'm constantly surprised by people in marketing and other creative mediums, how little of renegades are to go around. That's the way I always look at creativity. And I'm a designer by trade. That's what I spend most of my time doing. And I'm really a professional contrarian. And it's insane the amount of people who are in design or marketing who are not also professional contrarians, because the whole purpose of my job is to be the person who says that it doesn't need to be like this.
I've never been a Mac head, right? I've owned an iPad because it was a gift. I had an iPhone because it was the smartphone, and then the moment Android caught up, I went to Android. But that doesn't mean I don't see the value in iOS devices or iOS in general. What I will tell you is, on a whole, I would wager that Steve Jobs, if he was alive, would hate the lack of creativity coming out of iOS devices. The average designer in any capacity is an iOS user, and yet a lot of them are doing the same thing as everyone else. And that was, I mean, even if you just watch the movies, the biopics, regardless of who wrote it or what, you get the idea that Steve Jobs was an individual.
Yeah.
And he wanted you to express your inner creativity. And if he could make that a little bit easier, that was what he wanted the Apple or the Macintosh or iOS devices to do. And they're not. The people that I talk about at my former job that were the most followers were also the most ardent people who needed the most recent iPhone. And I find this hypocritical to what Apple originally stood for. And that's the only reason I bring it up, because it is just so funny that this man who was against all odds just wanted to be different and inspire others to be different is now being lauded by people who only want to be the same.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I've got an iPhone sat here on my desk. I'm using a MacBook right now. I've got an iPad somewhere in the other room as well.
But Steve Jobs would be proud of you, is what I'm saying.
You're totally right. I mean, I literally use, just on the Apple devices thing, I literally use Apple devices because they are easy. I am locked into the ecosystem and I am constantly complaining about them. I went through a phase of switching between Android, iPhone, about every 6 months. I always came back to the iPhone, and now I've got to the point where it works. I'm going to continue using it. It's got all my data on it. Fine. And I also like that they're pretty security conscious and they don't share your data. I don't like the idea whatsoever with any of my data being with Google. I don't use Gmail, any of that kind of thing. So I like that thing about Apple specifically, but you're totally right about what Apple stand for these days versus what they did stand for then. But that leads me back to the point of the era of Steve Jobs was the era of creatives that gave a shit. People like George Lois, you might not be familiar with him, but he was an ad man, a creative, really a polymath in every sense of the word, but a renegade. And he ran an ad agency. He ran several ad agencies, and he's written a bunch of books. But really, he was one of the creatives that was true to being a creative. You know, there's a famous story he gives out of, I mean, you've got to take these stories with a pinch of salt, but he was given a presentation for a new ad that he was doing. And by the way, apparently Don Draper is somewhat based on George Lewis from Mad Men. He was given a pitch for a new piece of work, and the client didn't accept it. He said, we don't want to go in this direction. So he said, right, I'm going to jump out the window. So he got to the window, opened the window, and started standing on the ledge, to threaten to jump out of the window, 50 stories up somewhere in New York. And the guys are like, fucking hell, you're really behind this campaign. It's like, yeah, I am going to jump if you don't go on it. Those kind of like crazy maverick, renegade, creative type people, that's what's expected from creative thinkers. But so many of modern icons in that era, well, what do you do if you're creative now? For me specifically, I'm a designer. All of my peers, they set up YouTube channels and do tutorials. That's all they do. This is how you do the latest thing in Photoshop. That's all. That's all they do. It's not particularly inspiring, is it? It's certainly not renegade. And there's nobody really doing anything creative or outside of the norm anymore. Is really what I'm trying to get at with that.
Well, and when it does happen, people shit on it. Like, let's be honest. There's a reason that people hate independent cinema. It's because it's unexpected. They don't know what to do with it. They can't comprehend it. Oh my God, the good guy didn't win and the bad guy didn't lose. Right? There's these, stalemates in independent cinema where people, they shit on it because they can't comprehend that the good guy or the bad guy doesn't win. They're going in with a mind that is closed, and good luck trying to open that.
And speaking of that, have you seen a film called Lock? Tom Hardy driving down a motorway.
No, but I might have to.
That's exactly that kind of film. I saw it at the cinema. So it's not really a proper independent film because it was at a chain cinema, but it was an independent film, a small film, and it's from, I don't know, early 2000s or something, mid 2000s, and it's just Tom Hardy driving down a motorway, a highway that you probably know it as. But I think he's actually driving down a motorway because I'm sure it's in Britain.
Okay.
And he's just talking to, I think it's his wife, just talking to his wife on a phone. And it's a really good film actually, but yeah, it's those kind of things people don't understand because it's out of the norm. But I honestly believe that's the kind of thing that the majority of us should be pursuing and pushing, because that at the edges of these things, if you're a true creative, at the edges of these things is where the magic lies somewhere. And if you're not pushing at those edges, you don't discover these new things or these new ways of making movies or podcasts or whatever, or writing things. If you stick within those lines, sticking within the lines and coloring in within the lines is not what creative people do. Or at least, in my opinion, that's not what they should spend their time doing. And I worry that. We're in somewhat of a dirge of that at the minute with the way that things are expected to be online. Take just long form content like what you said about your podcast about, was it your mum? You said your mum won't listen. That's because she's been trained to only listen to short stuff, because that's the thing that social media wanted to push: short form video, short form content, because they know that people are stealing little pieces of time in their day. They're waiting for the bus, or they're waiting for the lift, or whatever. They're walking up the stairs, or like I see so many blokes doing toilets, taking a piss and looking at the phone while they're taking a piss. That people are literally making content now for piss breaks, piss content, like 5-second videos. So while someone has piss, 5-second video, and over time people become detrained to listen or to read or to pay attention for any longer than like 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Which is terrible.
I think So I've been unemployed for a while, and I didn't want to waste the time. So as you can see on my blog, every other post is a book review. Every other one. And it's new books, it's old books. Currently, and I think my podcast listeners will get sick of hearing this, but I'm undergoing this challenge to read every book in my house, because why else is it in my house? And there's a lot of them that are like heavy philosophy or this, that, and the other thing. They're not all like wonderful books, but I have them. Why not read them? And I recently started watching the original Star Trek as a journey to watch all of Star Trek, because I was always more of a Star Wars guy, and I just never grew up with it. But I was like, I make references, but I also know its cultural importance. I want to go back and see what it's all about. Don't put that on the shelf. Like, if you have an interest, yeah, okay. So there's, and I only know this because like I did the research, like, so there's 3 seasons of the original series and 2 seasons of the animated series and a whole bunch of movies and then 7 episodes, 7 series of Next Gen and this. Who cares? Like, yeah, there's a lot of it, but I don't plan on dying tomorrow. And why should I just go, that's too much? No. I've picked up books that were 1,000 pages. Yeah, that's a lot, but you read it the same way. 1 sentence at a time. Like, it's not like you pick up a 1,000-word book and you go, I'm going to skip every 5th page or something. No, just pick it up and go. And I think that removal from like the corporate entity and from all that stuff, especially when I hear from friends that are just overworked in corporate spaces, I think this may be my renaissance. I don't know what I get out of it, mind you. Okay. Like I'm trying to process all the things I'm learning, but I am in that way watching these old things and reading these offline books. I'm kind of removing myself from the algorithm a bit.
Yeah. That's what you're getting from it. Well, a couple of things. You're nourishing your mind. You are not being influenced by all of the kind of content and shit we've just been talking about for the last 45 minutes or so. And 3, and I think it's the most important thing, and something that I write about quite a lot, is you're recovering your attention span, because you're when you go online these days, you are fighting to maintain your attention span. Ultimately, that is what you're in. You're in open warfare with your attention span, because everybody's trying to take it or attack it, remove it, steal it, whatever. The genuine only way you can do anything about it to recover your attention span is to remove yourself from online and read a book. Read a real damn book, a real proper book with pages and words and everything. And if you don't do that every now and again, you will struggle to concentrate. It's, there's been years and years in the US and in the UK and pretty much every developed country of productivity going down, commercial corporate productivity going down, and they measure it on hours worked and GDP and all these other kind of things. The real thing that nobody's factoring in yet, because I think it's probably still too young. Maybe this will start to be factored in another 30 years' time, when everybody's attention spans have been eroded, is social media seriously affects your attention span. And it's the thing that no one is really doing too much research on. And yeah, you're doing completely the right thing, because the amount of people, I was just talking about this to somebody the other day, the amount of people I know, friends, who say, I haven't got time to read a book. And then I'll be sat in their presence and we'll be talking about something. And then the conversation will go silent for 10 minutes. And they'll be on Facebook sending me links of things that they've seen. Well, that's 10 minutes there that you could potentially have read a book instead of reading that shit that you've just found on Facebook. Everybody still thinks reading books, actual books with words and paper and things. Everybody still thinks that that's a high school activity. that it's somehow homework to read a book. People don't see it in the same way. They don't see it as a relaxing thing, a lot of people, which is just crazy to me.
There was a lot of talk towards the end of this conversation about the algorithm, and we discuss it as such because while not all of them are connected, they overlap in such a way that it feels like there is one all-encompassing algorithm. There isn't, but remember, if you're seeing things on any of your various feeds, you have control over those. You can select to hide them and tell the platform, whatever it is, that those things aren't for you. You can also choose not to like things or click on things or watch things if the platform doesn't allow you to tell it that this isn't for you. But you do have more control over your algorithm and your feeds than you may believe. The other thing we spoke about that you have control over, well, you could also, if you haven't already, skip to the end of your online identity journey and just be yourself. Because while a little journey to discovery is a good way to determine who you want to be, who you are is not only your actual authentic self, it is easier to portray because you just have to be. So, whether it be taking control of your algorithm or who you are online, you are empowered not only with the tools to take control, but with the ability, should you choose to wield it. Go forth and perhaps be a maverick, be a renegade, be a true creative. Speaking from experience, it's a really fun place to be. Thanks for listening to The Palmer Files, episode 90. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact myself and my guest, Craig Burgess, in the show notes. There, you can visit either of Craig's 2 Substacks for his content or for more about him, yeahwednesdays.substack.com. That's YEAH Wednesdays, or you can visit thisisnotvalue.substack.com. Again, the name of that is thisisnotvalue.substack.com. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Craig, do you have one final question for me?
I have one question. Yes, and I haven't at all prepared this question. This is absolutely not prepared, but I've stolen it from somebody.
Okay.
I haven't just sat here and thought about this for 5 minutes. That's not what's happened at all. It's from a chap called Mark Dykman. He's got a Substack called How About This? I'm just telling everybody so they should check it out because I think it's a wonderful question. This is the question. Pretend you wake up one morning and you learn that the internet has been destroyed. What's the first thing that you do?
Probably the same thing I do every morning, which is just make some coffee. It's an interesting question, excepting for the fact that I do make most of my living and most of my passions on the internet. I'm still a guy who would turn it off. Like I would, you're not going to get me to stop writing. I'm just going to start sending those things to the newspaper if the internet goes away. And I probably moved this show to terrestrial radio or my local NPR station or something like that. Like I think I have other venues to go on. But if the internet goes away, I mean, I still have my books. I still have physical media. I mean, I know there are people out there that have like gotten rid of all their DVDs and their CDs, but that's not me. So my house is still going to be filled with music. I'm still going to have movies to watch. I I think I would have a call. If nothing else, I'd celebrate it, to be honest. If the internet goes away, I would probably celebrate it, because for as great as it's been, generally speaking, it is absolutely like, you know, the whole trope in science fiction of like that, those like more advanced races that are like, I can't give you this technology, you puny humans, you would use it to destroy yourselves. The internet is exactly that. It was something we probably should have never gotten because we have just used it to destroy ourselves. And I've ranted on this show before about one thing in particular. I'm not really happy that the internet's gone away while I'm drinking my coffee. What I want to happen is I want the technological barrier put back up. I don't want everybody and their mother and their child to have access to the internet. I want you to have to learn how a computer works. I want you to have to use the phone coupler that we saw in like war games. Like, I want a technical prowess, because then when you do get online, you don't take it for granted.
So how about we downgrade the internet as well then? What about, instead of getting rid of it, we go back to 56K?
Oh, absolutely. Because I'm set for that, because my blog is mainly text. Yeah. I don't throw in images other than to break it up for usability, but my images are small. So 56K, maybe it would take you a minute or two to download my longer blog posts. And obviously this podcast immediately goes to radio because it doesn't work in 56K. But yeah, I'm all right with it. I mean, I'm probably, it's probably the one conundrum about me is like, yeah, I make my living on the internet. I'm a digital marketer more than I'm a traditional marketer, and I'm a blogger and a podcaster. But absolutely, I will not stand in your way. I will not chain myself to the whatever or what. No, blow it up, slow it down, give it a ticket. Pour some water on the circuit boards. I'm all right with it.
So what about the opposite way around then? Let me think how I can word this. So pretend you wake up one morning and your entire collection of offline media has been destroyed. So no DVDs, no books, no magazines, comics, graphic novels, CDs, records, none of that stuff. You've lost everything. And you've got no memory of it either. So you don't remember what you had. But you've still got the internet. What's the first thing that you do?
I mean, I'm probably still making a cup of coffee. At least until, I mean, I keep reading. This is the one sad part. I keep reading these doom and gloom articles about how we're going to run out of coffee in my lifetime. So as long as that's available, that's still always going to be the first thing I do in the morning. But I guess it's going to be, because right now, with my morning coffee, I have a pad of paper and a pen, and I make a list of what I'm doing that day. So I guess that just becomes a digital list in like Google Keep or like Notepad or something.
But in this world, you don't have any references for that kind of stuff, so you don't even know where to begin. You've got the internet as the tool, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I feel like I would probably be a little lost because I have spent a lot of energy. Disconnecting is not the right word, but disassociating my life. So it's not 100% interchangeable with the internet. So if that other part goes away, I think I'd be like one of those people in a movie that gets like transported to a different place and they're like they have no idea what they're doing anymore. I think that would be me because I've tried to separate it on purpose.
And then after a few months, you'd understand all the memes online, but you'd never have seen any of the films. Imagine being that guy.
Well, I don't understand half the memes I see now anyway. So I feel like that's.
I mean the old ones, like Goodfellas memes and all that kind of thing going around, and Pulp Fiction, and you understand all those.
Yeah, I do think that But you can't possibly know all the memes. Like, I don't know anybody, because you'd have to watch everything.
Yeah.
And that seems exhausting. Like, I just want to read all the books in my house. Now, I have probably more books than the average person. But, like, that's an undertaking.
It is. I guess the wider thing I'm getting at is that there's two different ways to look at this here, isn't there? You and I, our cultural references are not really dictated by the internet. They probably are more than we realize these days, but we remember a time when the internet didn't exist. So our cultural references are different. And we, to some extent remember, old Star Trek, old Star Wars, all that kind of thing. Things were paced different, and they weren't designed to keep people with no attention spans connected to things. Whereas the other way that we're talking here is the world where everyone's cultural references, and this is the world that people live in right now and today, which I think is an interesting thing to think about. Everybody's cultural references come from the internet now, from seeing short clips on YouTube or TikTok or Twitter. It's a very different world. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's also one of those things where, like, we're the last generation to have a before the internet memory.
Weird.
And this is the other thing, right? We're the last generation to choose something over the internet. Because even if you wanted to look at that pornography on the internet in the early 90s, that's 15 minutes of downloading one high quality image. Yeah. You could just go out and, like, there are other things you can do with that 15 minutes. And in most cases, and I'm thinking about little boys and porn, like, of course, that's an option. It's attractive. But I think we just went outside and played tag because it's 15 minutes. Like, we were the last generation to choose something else.
Yeah.
No matter what.
This is why I mentioned the 56K thing, because the 56K thing is an inbuilt buffer for looking at pointless shit on the internet.
Yeah.
So you couldn't be having a conversation with a friend and say, "Oh, who's that? That dude in that TV? What TV show? Oh, it came out 2000s or whatever. Well, what was it? Oh, it was a survival show. Hold on, I'll Google it. You couldn't go survival show 2000s guy."
I mean, you could, but somebody might remember it before the page loaded. Like,
exactly.
That's
inbuilt buffer for you couldn't quickly waste 30 seconds on the internet on your mobile phone because you'd have WAP. At the best, you'd have WAP internet, which wasn't the internet at all in any way. So it's interesting to think about that I wonder how different things could or would be if we didn't have the internet so readily available anymore.
I have a hard time saying anything other than it would be better.
I agree.